Hi listeners, Jason here. I'm excited to announce that the Psych Health and Safety Conference, PHSCon, will be returning in 2025. After a tremendous success this year, we're going even bigger and better. Taking place on June 19 and 20 at the ICC Sydney, this will be your chance to join the largest psychosocial safety community gathering. Featuring world-class speakers like Adam Grant, Marianne Baynton and Rob Briner, and practical insights from industry case studies. The conference content is all about leveling up your ability to create work that is better for worker mental health and better for business. Whether you're in people and culture, health and safety, psychology or leadership, this 2-day event and optional pre-conference masterclasses is your opportunity to learn, network and grow. Don't miss out. Super early bird tickets on sale now at phscon.com. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Welcome everyone, I'm Erin O'Byrne and it's an honor to co-host here with Psychological Health and Safety Canada podcast. I've been working in the space of mental health and leadership development and coaching for over 15 years, both in-house and as a consultant and as founder of Work Wellness Coach. I am really excited for our amazing guest, Ryan Hopkins, today. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm connecting and recording today from the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I am very grateful to live, work, and play on these lands here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. So let's give a warm welcome to our incredible guest, Ryan Hopkins.
Woo! Was I meant to gym myself?
Everyone's clapping. And thanks for joining us all the way from the UK. This is awesome. It's your afternoon, our morning.
No, it's a pleasure. It's been a long time trying to get this locked in, so I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I first saw you speak on a webinar months and months ago, and what really stood out for me was your passion and dedication to the work. It stood out, and I'm going to read your bio because it just is amazing in what you're doing. And let's start there so our listeners know just all the great things that you're up to as we kick off today. Ryan is a global best-selling well-being author, Chief Impact Officer at Jack, Innovating Healthcare at Bupa, and former well-being leader at Deloitte, and is leading the UK's Workplace Rebellion. Ryan's work has directly, positively impacted the lives over 1 million people, engaging in a massive 16 million people on social media and delivering impactful talks like this one to over 100,000 attendees at conferences and events around the world. And he shares his battles with bulimia, psychosis, depression, and anxiety openly. He intends to engage 1 billion people for the betterment of well-being and helping others not end up where he did. And if they do, they know that they're not alone. So amazing, Ryan. I'm so glad to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. It all still makes me feel super awkward listening to it, but it's cool. I love it. Like, it's yeah, exactly as you said. Everything I do, because I know there's no tougher battle than the one you fight in your own head. And if you can help one person, it might change the world, but it might change the world for that one person. And knowing what I've been through, that's why I turn up every day, full beans, full heart, give it everything, data-led challenge respectfully, so we can make work just a slightly bit better for everyone. And like, it doesn't need to be this huge thing. And I'm trying to simplify what has been turned into a $5.6 trillion industry and give people the little tools they need to make tomorrow slightly better today. And that's it, really. Trying to simplify the noise and help people. I love it.
That's awesome. And Ryan, what's your kind of personal why? Because mental health is such a important topic. Curious what got you involved from the start.
Yeah, I had an accident when I was 19. 19-year-old Ryan Hopkins was going to be very different. I was a Sparky, you call him in the UK. I was an electrician, if anyone that doesn't know the slang. And I was playing rugby and I broke my leg and my ankle, was unable to walk, lost that career, put on a lot of weight, had no prospects, no hope, no qualification. I lost every part of my identity and I didn't know how I was going to come out of that moment. If it wasn't for mum in those years, then I wouldn't have made it out of that time. But I did. Then had a 8-year battle with bulimia and anxiety, with some really tough years. Yeah, just hard 12 years trying to find myself. I actually had a diagnosis of autism 2 months ago. So it's been a very interesting journey there as well, and understanding myself and potentially why things were so difficult growing up. Um, but I learned the power of sharing one story as I started to share at the odd event, and one or two people coming up and saying that's how I felt, or like didn't know that blokes had eating disorders. Like I thought it was just a female thing, or like fair. I was gonna swear then, but I didn't. But like fair play for like sharing your stuff, and then you start turning up on socials, and then 10, 20, hundreds, thousands people start like saying, yeah, like I feel you. And we speak about this stuff like you're in the minority when you're going through it, but it's bollocks, excuse me, but like it is. And like most people are going through some version of this. 1 in 4 people in the UK are currently struggling with their mental health. And that's 1 in 3 for young people, and it ain't getting any better. So every day I turn up just to help people create that space for this. And there's two sides of it. Like for work, it's not a company's responsibility to improve happiness. I think it's where we're getting it wrong. But it is their responsibility not to worsen it. They need to focus on creating a space and the culture where people can do what they want, and then say, you as an individual, you do it. So I look at it 2 lenses. How can I create space and make well-being data-led and a priority in workplaces? And how can I inspire individuals to make small changes to prioritize themselves in the context of an absolutely crazy and mental world? So it's dual aspects. And we often take one approach and apply it to both. So I'm trying do everything I can to create the space and empower individuals just to make everything a bit better. And that's what my latest TED talk last weekend was on, and my book and everything else. And it's really starting to jump up now, the numbers. And that's why I work endlessly on it, because I see now the number of people that it reaches and the impact it has. And well, he who has a why can deal with anyhow, he or she, right? Updating the quote, but that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, Ryan, it's amazing. And thank you for sharing that because, you touch on so many great points just right there. When we share these experiences, we realize just how common they are, right? And for myself too, I know my career was like 20 years ago, my first mental health crisis. And I realized I've got to do something about this. I want to help other people to not experience this. How can we be more proactive, like you said, to create that space? And that's where I love this conversation because I think when people hear psychological health and safety, they think mental health. And yes, it's a component, right? Because we talk about what is mental health versus psychological health and safety being that environment and space that we create to foster psychological health, right?
A hundred
And
percent.
I think the stats are unbelievable.
Yeah, in the UK, I'm a bit of a stat machine, so you'll have to excuse me, but like it's my love language. So the UK, the cost of the UK economy of like poor mental health, according to Deloitte, it's 51 billion. McKinsey, it's 130, but I think it's probably even higher because 59% of all exits in the UK last year were partially attributable to mental health related issues, stress, etc. Then if you think each person in the business does a piece of research is about 30k to replace, then you times that by the attrition for the business. I was working with a telecoms company not long ago, about 20k heads, and I found that they were losing about 32 million quid a year in well-being related attrition. The reason why this isn't a priority and it's seen as a niche subject and something that's taken care of by one bloke or woman sitting in a room over there who does the odd event at random times in the year is because that work hasn't been done to calculate the financial value. When that's done, then we're like, this is a priority. It changes the conversation. When you talk about psychosocial risk or psychosocial health, like health and safety or well-being or mental health, they're like, oh, just another thing. Like we take care of that. We tick the boxes. But when you do that assessment and actually work out the pound note value or the dollar value or whatever else, then it becomes a priority. But it has to be treated like a discipline. As I said, it's this dual approach. I talk to individuals about their experience. That's one thing. I don't talk to the C-suite about that. I speak in financial terms so they can prioritize it like they would another part of the business. So to get the respect and make it like a cross-functional priority, we've got to change the way we have this discussion.
Absolutely, yeah. And Canada's similar stats in terms of like relatively speaking, right? I mean, 50 million people in Canada just a couple of years ago were Stats Canada said they were diagnosed with mood or anxiety or substance misuse disorder. Like that's 1 in 3 of us, right? That's a lot of people. And then as far as what it costs the Canadian economy, it's about 50 billion a year in terms of loss of productivity. And like we have to change the focus, right? And so for those of listeners who may not know what jack.org is and the amazing source that it is, could you just describe a little bit about Jack?
Yeah, of course. So Jack stands for Just Ask a Question. Intend to be the Google for mental health. So when I was at Deloitte, loving it, I've gone back and set up the wellbeing business that we took to market, and I was taking that thinking and taking that around the world and how we can make work better if people take a data-led approach to it, make it a business priority. And I'm thinking, this is me, like this is what I'm all about. And then I was doing an event with Bupa actually, and I just split my trousers open when I got there. And I was talking about anxiety in the workplace, and I was on the stage and I had my trousers big split down the middle. I was basically wearing 2 legs. But on that call, Jack were announcing their boot partnership with Bupa. And then the Jack team messaged me afterwards and were like, we like what you're about, even though obviously you have wardrobe malfunctions. So I went to meet them, and they showed me the product. And it's like Netflix look and feel. We just asked a question in the search bar, 40,000 answers now. Celebrities, lived experience, and experts, over 100 topics. It looks like it could be a social media platform. It's all curated by clinicians and experts. We're working with Formula One teams, Premier League rugby stars, celebrities. We're working with some of the biggest businesses in the UK to create a space where people can ask a question anonymously on addiction, trans awareness, everything that you could think of as a human, race, identity, eating disorders, religion. We are trying to be the place that you just ask a question. You think, am I going through this? Am I alone? Because when you understand what's going on up here, that is half the story. And then you can go and have a conversation with someone about it. There's the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, and they say that 74% of people in the top of the triangle who don't need any support, as you go down, then you've got 1% who are severe, 4% who are moderate, and about 15% who need a reasonable amount of care. And then the rest of people are just going about their day. But as we're seeing, the number of people who are suffering is increasing. So we're just leaving the people at the top of the funnel and not addressing them with anything. We're waiting till people are broke. So what we intend to do is give it's psychoeducation, but it's not boring. It's engaging. We want to make it flashy. We want to make it like vibes. Do you know what I mean? Like, build, like get people to want to come into it. And when we normalize it, when we create that space and we make it engaging and people want to come and see and ask those questions, someone like me has been through something like I am experiencing. Okay, I'm not alone. And then we pathway people to Bupa, to other care. So we either give them enough information, they go on with their lives, or we put them to where they need to be better educated. This is saving healthcare organizations millions by refining the pathway and getting people into care faster. And it's giving people the information faster as well. Because where people turn at the moment, they turn online, they go to WebMD or something, and you go down a rabbit hole, you go to social media. A social media platform recently, they assessed essentially the validity of mental health information. 84% was factually incorrect, with 14% to be damaging if you were to implement for yourself. We intend to step into that hole. Jack.org is free for the world, and it's going to be the place that people go for these resources globally. That's the intent. We want to answer a billion questions through the platform. Then we create a workplace platform, which we've launched with NatWest, Bupa, Formula One teams now, as I said. And it's just a start. And then we're building one for kids, which is going live next year. And it's the best thing I've ever seen. And it'll be available for kids to understand divorce, moments, going through schools, if they're neurodiverse like myself, to normalize these conversations. So what we're doing is we're bringing the conversation into the everyday, and we're making it not feel like a mental health conversation. So yeah, it's when you see it, like you said, you like, oh my God, how has this not existed before? And when I saw it, I was like, all right, fine, I'll quit at Deloitte and I'll come and lead over here. So I love it.
Yeah, what I love about jack.org, and for those listening, it's JAAQ.org. Just ask a question, is the conversational element of the approach, and just the video clips, the way they're recorded. It's like somebody's sitting in front of you talking, and the sound bites, like you can kind of explore more, and it's laid out so clearly and conversationally. I think you guys have absolutely nailed how people resonate with information that can be tough to access or understand.
Growing up, I didn't know anyone that had bulimia when I was 20, 13 years ago, let alone a bloke, let alone a working class bloke who was a electrician about a year before. So if I had that resource then, I might have understood myself a bit better and not felt like I was completely alone in the world for most of my adult life. So I wish it was something that makes me feel sad. Like I wish it was something that I had at the time, and I know how many people it's helped. We launched with a bank in the UK with NatWest, incredible partner, and we put it on their screens, the free site. Someone messaged in and said, "Until I saw the conversation on depression with Alistair Campbell, I didn't know I had a problem. I was suicidal, and now I understand myself, and I'm getting the help I need." And I'm like, "This is everything." And it's why we do what we do, and it saves lives. It might seem like a piece of content, but the way we're serving up these difficult conversations, I think, will transform this space. And that's credit to Danny Gray, who came up with the idea. Yeah, like just an absolute genius from this perspective, and we're building just such an amazing team, and we're taking it to the moon.
Yeah, and it's it's such a great the variety. I mean, the topics of mental health and physical health that you cover, and then the speakers that you have and the range of experts. It's just an incredible resource, and that it's all free. I mean, that's an incredible support for so many people, especially internationally, right? Knowing that, hey, mental health and its impacts are universal, right? Like there's kind of, it's great to have that.
Hopefully soon we'll be launching over in Canada as well. Intent is for 26 to internationalize to more English markets, Oz, Middle East, Canada, US, Ireland next year, hopefully. So the intent is to get local creators on there because it's important. Like as much as it might be nice listening to English or British creators, you want someone that's from the world that you recognize, like big faces in from like Canada. So that's what we'll need to do. We'll have to go over and start doing that as well. But we are doing that and it's going to happen.
That's excellent. And, I think that, the state of the world the last few years has really helped create a level playing field in terms of awareness around mental health and its impacts and the resources that are out there.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
I'm curious what changes you've noticed in the last few years, even just with Jack, like what's kind of been some of the evolution?
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day. I do a lot of noodling and I write every day. So this one came, I don't think we've got in most workplaces an issue with speaking about mental health in the past tense. So I'm like, I had bulimia, I was depressed, I had anxiety. We do have an issue in the present tense still. So you wouldn't say to a manager, I'm currently experiencing X. It's still much easier to say I've got a stomachache. So, but that is changing. But I think still a lot of work to be done to create the space for people to have those conversations in real time. Because I think we talk about it. There's a lot of amazing people doing amazing things, and I go and do talks and stuff. I say this talk is limited and the impact will be minimal, but I'm willing to come and do it for you in your business because I'm going to guess I'm going to get paid. But equally, like you have to make these changes, and I'm like with respect, like I might inspire one or two people, but we got to make well-being a priority by doing the assessment properly, by doing the measurement. We found in the UK that only 1 to 2% of companies are using organizational data to measure the effectiveness of their efforts. So right now it's finger in the air. I think this is working. I have an assumption that this is something we need. Someone once told me this works. But what we are doing, we're not addressing the present tense. We're not addressing the underlying drivers of poor well-being or mental health or psychological risks. And we are just simply addressing the symptoms still. But we're doing it with good intent and heart. No one in the space is not trying to help. But by launching a meditation app, as good as it can be for an individual intervention, you are addressing the outcome of stress as a result of one of the drivers of the workplace instead of addressing the thing that's actually causing said stress. And this is where we are. And we have more awareness days than ever. Again, like pre-Black Lives Matter, you think the work that's been done in that space since then, amazing and absolutely right, like crucial. But we're talking about it more than ever. But have we done anything to address pay equity? Have we done anything to address recruitment practices? And I feel like by continuing to do this work in the D&I, wellbeing, mental health, neurodiversity space, by talking about it and not addressing the things that are causing the stress, you're just pissing people off. And I'm like, now we are acutely aware we have said issues because we talk about it more than ever, and too right. But unless we address the things that are causing these issues, I feel like it's the paradox of awareness, and we're actually creating a problem for ourselves. Either organizations have to be, we're going to continue to talk about this stuff, and we're going to take bold action, which might cost some money, or we might have to reduce productivity by 2%, but we know we'll keep hold of our top talent, which will save in attrition. But that work has to be done. Or stop doing the awareness days. Stop talking about it if you're not going to take the action and just be a transactional workplace. That's equally fine, but don't pretend to be otherwise.
Absolutely. And I totally hear you. I agree so much. And I just want to touch on earlier, you were talking about the stigma piece, right? I think that's so important that the comfort level of the conversation is changing and there's still more we can do, right? When you think about the stigma associated with it, the misunderstanding, it's not like the broken leg situation. People get it. They know there's a timeline to it. They understand it. Whereas when we talk about mental health, it's sort of still received differently. And I truly believe conversations like this, resources like Jack, and lots of resources here in Canada too, that help move that dial, right?
It's so hard. Like, as a manager now, it's a thankless task. Gallup's report recently found that the 70% of a team's variance is due to the manager. And everyone bashes the manager. Managers suck. Managers are worse. Manager, rah, 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 rah. Like, it's an easy cop out. And yes, a bad manager will ruin your life. Let's be real. You've had one. I've had one. A good manager will get shit out of the way and let you be your best self, right? We want you. I want you, Erin, to be your best self. What can I do to support you? I'm not an individual contributor anymore. I'm your manager and I'm creating a space for you to get it done. What can I do? But I have been in my life, I've been bulimic, I've been suicidal, depressed, anxious. I've got autism and ADHD diagnosed. Would you know how to support me? I am a nightmare. Right? So what we have to do, these time-strapped managers say, how can we support the managers and give them the resource they need when they need it? Because I can't expect my managers in my organization to be experts in every topic that I've experienced. That's unfair and not reasonable. But how can we at least say, it's your job to create the environment, here are the resources when you need them. 97% of managers want to promote the well-being of their team. There's always outliers. The 3%, I've got no idea. We found this at Deloitte. But 7 out of 10 of that same population said they can't due to bureaucracy, process, workload for themselves. So how do we unlock managers? We found at Bupa, the biggest challenge with workplace well-being is managers. This is where dreams go to live or die. So how do we unlock this level? And what it is creating a space for them and helping them understand they're not individual contributors and how can they help a team with diverse needs to flourish. And that is not a one-size-fits-all solution. That's creating the space, reducing the friction and letting people of their individual and diverse circumstance turn up as they are. Not easy, but when you get it right and you can unlock diverse teams and create an inclusive environment, we know that organizations thrive. But it's a lift. It's a lot of work. And if the work is transactional, the cost point to reduce an employee is minimal, then is the work going to be done? But if we want to keep teams happy and high performing, it has to be.
Yeah, and I could agree more. In a recent Australian podcast for psych health and safety, there was a highlighting around the importance of line manager training, right? So those managers, supervisors, and how if you can enhance an employee's well-being by your understanding, you get increased productivity, you get reduced absenteeism, reduced turnover. There's like this whole culture, right? And then the overall business cost, you're not spending that because people are away or taking more time off or turnover, right?
Exactly. You got to also understand the context of the organization you're working with. With Deloitte, obviously, we work with lots of different companies, and with Jack, we have as well. So when you're integrating a well-being or another offering, you have to think, how do we integrate digitally, meeting people in the moment that they need it? There's been a 3x increase in digital meetings compared to pre-pandemic. The average digital worker checks their email every 6 minutes, and we spend 57% of our day responding to emails, instant messages, and on calls. That is where you start, ladies and gentlemen. If someone's working on a laptop, give them 5 minutes themselves. Do you want another webinar, or do you want a gap in between meetings to go for a wee and make yourself a coffee? Like, I know what I would prefer. So it's often not as complex as we've made it, and you've got to understand where you're meeting people. And we got to unlock the space. So you have to think digitally, where do we meet these people? Physically, that then isn't going to work for someone on a factory line. So you think, how these people spend their day? Do we integrate QR codes into pay slips? Do we look at how we do their check-ins in the morning before they start the line? And then finally into ways of working. So well-being solution or intervention isn't just something that we do once we have time, which is why it's single-digit utilization for almost all of them. I think, how can we integrate into the learning journey? Can this be part of manager induction? Is this in the onboarding journey? How can we integrate into the external careers site? It takes a lot of work, but then this makes well-being it's not the focus, it's an outcome. Then you support the whole business, create a space where it thrives. And where we're getting it wrong, we're pointing at it too much. Awareness days and apps and stuff like that has to be integrated into the foundation of the business. So this is how we work here. You're welcome however you are. And then when we've done all the assessment up the top, the attrition, the absenteeism, we look at the drivers, the work week, we look at the sentiment, we pull it all together, then we get a true picture of what we need to do. And I guarantee it probably isn't another app.
Absolutely. And you touch on, the culture shift, right? I mean, look at the McKinsey 7S model, right? You've got your systems and structures, and then you also have the kind of soft skills, right? And I think that with culture, it's really important to say, look, structurally, let's look at some of the systems. So, from a psychosocial aspect, looking at job design and what is the workload like, what is manageable for this role. And yes, we need to take into consideration different environments.
You're so right. And you're touching on something that I like to address. I like to be respectfully contrarian and challenge people, because why not? And it's fun. So I think, like, we talk about work-life balance, you talk about culture and stuff. And if you leave that to chance, then it's never going to happen, is it? Work-life balance is an outcome of boundaries in a connected world. So unless you say, this is how we work here, this is the expectation, unless you're able to build in the fact you've got to pick up your kids after school at a certain hour, it will not happen. Your boundaries will not be respected. We can build that in digitally. If you've got 6 meetings per day and you cut each one by 5-10 minutes, you'll save 4.8 work weeks worth of effort this year. That's where we start. And when we leave it to chance, I guarantee the shout of an email or a manager's note is louder than you having a quiet dinner with your family. But over time, that will not make you happy or healthy, and you will leave that business. So to keep people happy in the business, I want to see things like right to disconnect. We'll make it clear what happens here in this business. We'll do the assessment look on the back end to make sure we're not trying to work people out of hours, because inputs don't equal outcomes for most of us. And I know Ontario launched a right to disconnect, which made me really happy. And then hope the UK is having that discussion. So we're trying to catch up with Canada. We're a little bit behind, you see. We're a bit more like the US from that perspective. But lots of countries around the world are seeing that be implemented. And while it isn't the be all and end all, I think it sets out the goal of the organization. And they found in this assessment of organizations that implemented the right to disconnect, it significantly increases job satisfaction, even if people still do get a few messages come in, because this is a statement of intent and how we work here, right? Yeah, there's so many changes in this from this perspective. You think Gen AI is going to automate about 50% of the work in the legal profession, apparently. There's going to be 2 types of law organizations. Those that just get rid of all the tasks, just cut 50% of the workforce and focus on sheer workforce optimization numbers, or those that take away 50% of the work, then they let a lawyer realistically have a happy family life, spends an evening with their kids. Which law firm are you going to recruit to come and represent you in your case? I know where I'm going. So hopefully, with organizations who set out their stall, they take a data-led approach to the future of well-being. We can create a space where us as individuals can turn up exactly as we are, as difficult as some of us are, like myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touch on, that control measure, right? Around like, what are some of those policies in place? How flexible can we offer? What flexibility and hours can we offer our employees where it's relevant? Because you're right, and especially with newer generations coming in, it's kind of it's an expectation as opposed to a nice to have. And I think that's where a lot of the culture in workplaces are changing these days, right? And then it is, as you said, a blend of, okay, what training and tools are we offering, what kind of work environment, whether it's in an office or remote, what are some of the job roles like, and these are all those control measures that employers can take a look at and review, right? And I do notice definitely in the consulting space where, like you said, employers, they know it and they kind of do this kind of like pro well-being program or something, but it's about interconnecting it with existing systems. So say like health and safety, right? There's a lot of regulation around physical safety. How can we weave in some of this, like for us, national standards still voluntary? How do we get employers to step into that space? And I think, Ryan, you've got so much experience in the Jack workplace. It'd be great to hear a bit more about some of those actions that you recommend.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you say the flexibility. We made huge strides during the pandemic to democratize the workplace, giving people like from previously marginalized backgrounds, working mothers predominantly, people who are neurodiverse, an equal playing field by developing flexible working. But we're seeing a hard RTO return to office at the moment from a lot of organizations, some of the biggest in the world. It's really interesting to see this because every single one of those that I've looked at, the rationale to pull people back is for collaboration and culture and community. And I get this. There's things that are better together. Let's be real. Like whiteboards better in person, like as good as Miro and stuff like that is, and to collaborate and to do that sort of thinking. But to pull back 5 days a week is to lose the gains that we've made from an improvement in creating a more diverse and inclusive workforce. And it's going to predominantly hurt working parents and people of certain backgrounds. We're seeing a lot of working mothers and fathers in the UK have to stop work completely if demanded back in the office 5 days a week. So while we've made some positive steps, we have stepped backwards a little bit with this one recently. And I would love it if an organization said, we've seen a reduction in this, or we know that this is stronger because of A, but they've all been off of feels. And to make such a big change to a business off of wearing rose tinted glasses of how things used to be just seems bizarre. But maybe I'm missing something. They don't have to share their data, right? But to make these assumptions and pull people back, it seems like they're missing a trick. But equally, then if we're trying to optimize and refine the workplace, actually get rid of some heads while we're like augmenting our AI co-pilot, then maybe this is just a way to get rid of people without paying redundancies. But maybe I'm just being cynical. But yeah, so there are things that are happening and we're moving backwards from some regards, but then there's some huge progressions as well. And if you think, as I was saying about Jack, we think about how we integrate digitally, physically, and into ways of working. So it's a triple integration, because it would piss me off if we launched and we didn't get anyone to use it and it just annoyed people. And it's just one more thing that's over there when you use it. And to really do it, you've got to put in the work to meet people in those moments when they need it. Because the average attention span, according to Gloria Mark from the University of California, is like 47 seconds. And the average attention span, according to Microsoft, is 8.25, which is less than that of a goldfish. Regardless whether you listen to Dr. Gloria or to Microsoft, it is short. So if you do not meet someone in the moment that they need it with at least a tiny bit of information to help them educate themselves, they're going to kick the can down the road. And then we're going to come back against this problem harder next time. We've seen this with Bupa data with the 25% increase in severity of mental health claims year on year. This is bad news. So people engaging later in mental health pathways, struggling more, coming at like when they need more acute care. It's one of the biggest challenges for the workplace. And to do so, we have to change how we turn up, as I said, and integrate into ways of working, put it into manager toolkits. And that does take work, but then it's fundamental to do the analysis, the data piece up front, to understand how many people are leaving due to attrition, what's the real sickness rate as opposed to what people are ticking the box of. Is it a stomach bug, or is it because they're so stressed out because their manager can't manage their own workload and they're pushing it downstream to the team? This work has to be done. and then the true cost of well-being will be understood. When that happens, I guarantee there's not one exec in the world that won't make this a business priority. So do the data piece.
Getting the benchmarking, right? Like instead of saying, okay, what's current state? How do we take a bit of an assessment and audit around, some of these key factors in our workplace? And then you're right, it's is that data accurate? Is that a real reflection of what people are experiencing, right?
It's tough, and it takes a brave leader, often a HR or benefits lead, to implement this work, because then what will shortly follow is that current efforts are not having an impact on the business. And that will mean a ripping up of current efforts, of things that are being done, of certain groups and investments that have been made. Maybe a bit of dirt on one's face because there's a lot of investment that hasn't necessarily moved the dial. Equally, things have changed dramatically over the past 4 years with regards to how we work. So I think it was going to be difficult, and I think maybe they stemmed the tide. But if we do all that assessment, we understand the cost, we understand what's driving poor well-being, then yeah, the ROI of current interventions will be minimal, if anything, and then it'll require a rethink. And as I said, with well-being, it's not an organization responsibility to improve happiness, but if they focus on not worsening it, then we move away from bikes, bananas, and one-off events to actually creating a workplace so people can do what they need. And by flipping that switch, they might actually have to say to the business, this month, we are not going to offer you anything. We're actually going to take some stuff away. With well-being, the biggest thing that we can do for our own well-being today or tomorrow is actually learn how to say no and create some space. It's a Western concept to add more to fix, whereas we can almost look to the east to create some space, because unless you have 5 minutes yourself, you're not going to be able to focus on anything. And it's about well-being is no small thing, but it's made up of small things. So if you invest a couple of pounds or dollars today, you do it for financial freedom. If you look after your health today, you're doing it to avoid injury later. You eat well today to avoid illness later. You pay a little today, or you pay a lot later. If you improve 1% every day for a year, you're 3,778% better at the end of the year with compound interest. That's all there ever is the small moment. There's no app, no webinar, no silver bullet. So when we flip that switch and we start taking stuff away from people, giving them autonomy and agency around how they spend their time, you'll find that you do something different to me, to my next door neighbor, to the person listening on this call. And when we take that data approach and create the space and start to pull stuff away, I think this is an amazing start. Then we can create the opportunity to launch. Who knows? Maybe it is a Jack. Maybe it is something else. It might not be. But then we'll get the opportunity to meet people in those moments once they've created the space to do it. Because right now, piling stuff on people's plates that's already full and expecting them to do extra when the biggest cause of stress in the workplace is workload is guaranteed to piss people off. So maybe for a couple of months, the efforts will be none and they'll be negative. But I think this would be the biggest thing that we can do for people.
Yeah, Ryan, it's so true. And you think about the trends of what people are bringing to the table, right? The International Coach Federation, their recent research on coaching and mental well-being, that people are bringing more about work and kind of like my personal stressors, and then how do I manage stress, right? The CIPD, the HR certification, was saying, they did a research in February around the role of trust and psychological safety, right? These are things that we know. And that's why, as you outline, these programs that are just kind of sticker, check a box activity, because it's not getting to the root of a situation. It's not building a culture. And, Deloitte had that research around the ROI. It was, for every dollar spent was $1.61, unless the program was implemented for 3 or more years, where it moved up to $2.18 return. And so I think you're right. There's something about the kind of embedding of practices, and it comes from a space of how are we creating space. Absolutely, that's a great place to start, and it doesn't have to be much, right? And so when we think about little changes employers can make at work to say, okay, psychological health and safety, what do we mean by this? What are the factors involved? Let's do a little bit of a needs assessment and start with one thing. Is it about ending meetings 5 minutes early and encouraging a deep breath, like between calls?
Yeah, there's not many of those every day, is there? Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes such a difference.
And what would you say, some of the common challenges that employers you work with, what are they coming to the table with?
Lack of insight, understanding, and combined data sets almost. So lots of siloed data, not a clear picture of why things are happening, working off a sentiment. That's the biggest challenge, I think, because then the concept, the challenge is not fully understood. And then we're working off of half-baked assumptions, always with good heart. As I say, no one does this because they don't want to help. But is it moving things forwards? If we look at the data, it wouldn't say yes. So if we want to help, which the people in these positions do, then we got to have a real difficult, radical, candor conversation with ourselves, and might be some difficult conversations with the exec, but have to cross that bridge, right? If we want to move things forwards. Digital overwhelm for people working on laptops, absolutely huge. Like if you don't have time in between meetings, you could have the world's best intervention. I could understand you better than your entire family, and I still wouldn't be able to give you the solution you need if you are in endless calls. So you have the world's best solution, but if there is no space, it will not work. And then finally, the research from the Oxford Wellbeing Research Centre with Indeed is the biggest study ever carried out on the workplace. They found the top 3 drivers of workplace wellbeing. You've alluded to them already, so you're very switched on, as I expected. But it's belonging, trust, and being energized by your work. So how often do you finish the day with more energy than when you started? Probably rarely. But if we can create a space where that happens, those days where you finish like you're like electric, and they're the days we want to lean into. How can we give people more of those moments and help them recharge rather than actually drain their batteries? Because over time, this will tell. You said the trust piece, so true. So true. And we're seeing the opposite of that with the return to office and demanding people to work certain ways and focusing on keeping our light green when we're working on our laptops as opposed to spending some time going elsewhere. Screw that. Judge me on what I produce, not how long I sit here doing it. Do you know what I mean? I don't care how long it takes. And then finally is belonging. And that's everything that you said. Psychological safety, absolutely. Multiple words for it. That might scare people off. At the end of the day, if people feel that they can bring themselves to work, they'll feel connected to what they do. They will stay inside that organization and they will give. This is also why Oxford research as well found the best thing that you could do to improve subjective mental health is volunteering. Most wellbeing interventions are actually worse than subjective wellbeing. Interesting research done on the macros. It doesn't necessarily work for individuals. It just means that diverse people need different things. But what it does teach us about wellbeing is that people who are able to give back, contribute to others, have the resource, time, and finances not to worry about a second job can give. And that comes back to the trust, to the belonging, being energized by your work. And if you keep those things front of mind and how can we create the environment where that happens, I don't think you can go far wrong. Data-led, meet people where they are and make it small because, again, time is the biggest thing. So if we can impart some wisdom in micro bites in a few seconds, I think we can help people move forwards that 1%. And as we said over time, a 1% every day for a year is a pretty astronomical difference at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's true in these small steps because I think, psychological health and safety, mental health at work can be a very daunting subject. And you're thinking, okay, well, I know I need to do something about it, but where do I start? And what are some pieces? And so I love that idea of just saying, let's take a look at the landscape. How are our days structured? What are some ways we can remove some of that technological demand? And I also, picking up on what you said earlier around interconnected, pieces of the business, right? And these siloed components. One area often overlooked is about employee onboarding. If you start in a new company, there is that excitement, and then there's also a drop-off point where psychological safety actually drops, and it is as a result of the department that they're in and where they're at with it, and just sort of that sense of new hires, right? There's a huge correlation there.
Yeah, every cohort in the business, the new ones, the existing ones, the older ones, we see in the UK now, apparently only 10% of the UK is engaged at work. We are a miserable bunch. We only beat the French and the Italians just. The US are much more, and Canada are much more enthusiastic, a bit more yeehaw than we are. We're a bit more gloomy. But what that means, so you said about new joiners is so true, but they often come in and they inject new things, and we want a healthy amount of turnover to get new people into business, to bring new ideas. But we're seeing attrition actually drop for the first time in a while. We had the great resignation, that's finished, tight markets, people are holding on to job, and people are staying in organizations where they're not necessarily engaged or want to do the work, which is another challenge unto itself, which is why we're seeing huge levels of presenteeism, very difficult to assess. But we know for every one disengaged person, you need 5 actively engaged to counteract their negativity effect on the business. So we have to try and focus on giving these people the space or helping them actually exit as well if they want. Like a thank you so much. We appreciate you. On you go. And then we can keep that energy in the business. It's not a forever thing, isn't it? I think how we can parachute in and out. And it takes like novel approaches to work to make sure we understand the context in which we are playing. Big presenteeism, low levels of engagements. How can we lean into that and then start to support the business? So again, it comes back to that data piece as well, right? If you have that assessment, you understand the attrition, the rationale, and you're looking into that big disengagement challenge, we think, all right, this might be where we focus this week. And I'd guarantee you probably won't mention the word well-being, mental health, psychosocial risk, psychological safety, or any of those words. They are outcomes of creating an inclusive, flexible, workplace that focuses on autonomy. So they're two separate concepts. And the more we talk about it, the less likely we are to affect it. Again, there's another paradox. They're like buses. They come across, you don't see one, then they come along 2 in a row. The paradox of well-being, the less you mention it, the more likely you are to affect it. And when we understand that it's a business priority, something measurable, and then we understand the impact and the correlation between that and productivity improvement in sales, which we saw at British Telecom, a 1-point increase in subjective happiness over 18 months, resulting in a 13% increase in sales. That was an Oxford study as well. So we know happy people are more productive. Or is it that productive people are more happy? Regardless, there is a link. And that's what we should be focusing on, right? So it's an outcome of creating a quality workplace. So we've got to take the pressure off, perhaps. Stop talking about it so much and think, how can we create the environment where it will arrive?
Absolutely. And I love, reminding me of Amy Edmondson's definition of psychological health and safety, right? She says it's a means to the goal, and the goal is excellence, right? Businesses want to be good. Employees want to come to work to do their best, right? It's kind of if we, reorient ourselves around, let's just get into the work, and the outcome will be a sense of psychological safety, balance, higher productivity, all those good things.
I worked with an organization, 10,000 person fintech, and the average work week was 49 hours, according to Microsoft Analytics. And I said, this is an issue. And then we mapped that against the attrition across different functions, and we could see an increase in work week resulted in an increase in voluntary attrition, costing the business a lot of money. And it didn't result in an increase in sales or productivity. So we're unpicking the myth that more equals more. Then we focused on creating space in the digital environment. Didn't spend any money, focused on every single week, little things that we do as a business to create space and enabling managers to support their teams to make those changes as well. We ended up saving the business 2.4 million hours, reducing voluntary attrition by over 5%, saving millions. And that was by making these tiny little improvements to create space. Not once did we mention well-being, mental health, everything else, but subjective scores rose by about 30% as well. So when we create the environment and give people the trust to focus on what they need, you as an individual, Aaron, I got you. Like, you do what you need, all right? I'll support you. I'll give you the resources. It's all over there when you're good and ready. But as a team, we'll create the environment for you to do that. Again and again and again, we see the impact. And again and again and again, we're questioning the impact of point solutions, as good as they can be for individuals, but on the macro, it's very difficult. So takes a new way of thinking, I think, a cross-functional approach. I actually think the future of well-being, the biggest function or component of that will be IT and tech, as opposed to being held by HR traditionally. And it will shift, because then that's the biggest challenge in regards to anyone that works on laptops like us.
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see how the space changes, right? And our ways of working, how they evolve. And what you are highlighting too is a really good example of that cycle, right? Like the plan, do, check, act, right? Like, okay, let's set out a benchmark. Let's take some action. Let's see how it's going, and then let's take action again, right? And to kind of do this cyclical way of reviewing things, just like we do a business strategy, to say, okay, we looked at this from a holistic point of view. How are all our different business areas and strategies, like the HR, even the IT, how is that feeding into the way we work and how people feel about it?
100%. It's like, I imagine, well, I hope actually, in 5-10 years' time, there will be no more D&I, no more well-being teams, none of that. They'll come together into one team with one goal, which is to create an inclusive workforce, which is ultimately diverse and then has a high sense of subjective well-being, which will know then drives business performance, reduces attrition. When they come together, then they'll stop cannibalizing one another's efforts, because at the moment you've got initiative for this niche thing against this niche thing against this thing over here, and we're all fighting for attention. And if you take lessons from consumer advertising, so when you're trying to sell something, you need it's a warm lead, you need 10 to 12 touch points with the person for them to engage and then begin that sale before you will get it. If it's cold, it's 20 to 50. So we got to think, how can we increase those touch points and take those lessons for consumer advertising, integrate that into what we're trying to offer for our people, come together and align on a common purpose, and then we can amalgamate those efforts. We can develop the scope. We can change the way that we work fundamentally. And then I think we'll have a much bigger impact. It was almost like Wellbeing 1.0 was events, point solutions, stuff like that. 2.0 will be fully integrated, measurable, cross-functional, and that is the shift change. And there are some organizations who are embracing that. Some are finding it hard because resource constrained, doing what they can, doing enough to keep people happy, but to really have that transformation, it takes a different approach. But it's unfortunately almost like a ripping up of current ways of working. It's not easy to do.
It needs change, right? And I think a big part of that too is employee input, right? And being able to say, what do you want to see? What does this look like for you? What's working? What's not in our space? How do we want to evolve? And then looking at, because, as we know, everyone has unique thresholds for stress or has unique needs for their environment to be optimal. And so how do we kind of bridge that? Okay, as an individual, here's what you need, and then as a culture or as a department or team, here's how we're going to be working, right, to kind of meet the masses. And
This is the magic sauce. You've nailed it. That's it. Like, if anyone takes anything away from today, that is literally it. How, as a business and as a team, can we create the space, the environment, reduce friction? And what do we need as an individual to add to you to get you to be your best self? And that's it. And often that's as simple as saying, what can I do to support you in this team? And then as a manager or a leader, just knowing where the resources are and then pointing people in that direction. And what we're trying to do is be the easiest place that people can get that information, where you just ask a question. I get it? You know what I mean? So that's what we're trying to do. So by integrating into Slack, Teams, ways of working, everything else, we want to be there when people need it in the moment that they need it, because we know that people are struggling with attention. We check our phone 352 times a day. We get about 80 notifications a day. We check our email about 100 times a day at work. So it gives very little time for us to think, to reflect, and think about what's going on, and then challenge and make those changes. So that's, yeah, again, I will sound like a broken record, but that's a lot of where we can start.
what would you say surprised you most about the work you've been doing lately?
What surprised me most? I think we're fortunate that Jack is quite an innovative new thing, and it's a bit challenging for some people. We got topics on there that haven't been discussed in the workplace before. So it's so important, but it's the response and eagerness of leaders I've seen and worked with at NatWest, at Bupa, at other places that are keen to do something different. So it's the hunger to try something new, and I can't remember the last time that it's felt like this. And I think that's a hugely positive starting point. And a lot of people are turning up different, trying new things, ripping up the rule book, and I absolutely love it. I'm all here for it. That's the workplace rebellion. It's a slow, respectful, data-led, well-being rebellion, but by making those small changes, we're seeing huge, like, positive improvements. And yeah, I'm just excited for the next year to write my next book, to continue doing this work, to take it up a level. And in a couple of years' time, we'll reflect back on how draconian we were in 2024 and the huge progress we've made. But it feels like it's a step change with the availability of tech, the understanding and the attitude. So I'm very, very hopeful that in the next 2 years, we'll make more progress than we have in the past 20.
Yeah, and that genuine, right, interest and kind of awareness that's bubbling up. And then I think you're right about the tools that we can provide workplaces to say, okay, here's how you can benchmark. Here's some ways that you can be integrating it without calling it well-being and without, it's kind of like just this is the way we do business. We don't even need to have, focus groups or, it's just, that's like awesome. I would, I think too, there's, Jack.org is wonderful for story, like resource, like a one-stop hub, right? And you're reminding me, there's a few in Canada as well that are worth mentioning around, for employers who are looking for building strategy, workplace strategies for mental health, right? That's a national resource that employers can go to just say, hey, here's where you can start. Like, you want to talk about, have an agenda that talks about this? Do you want some research and kind of articles? The Mental Health Commission of Canada and Opening Minds has some incredible training for leaders who are listening. I've just been working on a project recently with People Working Well, bc.ca, and that's in partnership with Canadian Mental Health and Go2HR, who's the Health and Safety Association for tourism hospitality in the province. And so it's very cool because it's like Jack's doing, it's tailored supports and resources to the industry, right? And so we're able to, it's so important to, like you said, speak that language of the workplace that you're in, right? And how can we raise the awareness, in incremental changes.
So it's never going to be from here to here. It's here to here, like, and then next year we'll go to there. And we're trying, a lot of us, with an enlightened rose tinted pair of glasses. It should be like this. Well, the world isn't like that, unfortunately. So let's be real. Let's get the data right. I think how we can improve by 1%, because that'll be a bigger forward improvement than we've made in the past 10. So let's start with those actionable goals and set ourselves something realistic that we can truly get after. Because also, then the people listening to this call are probably not the CEO. There might be, hello, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, if you are here, but the people you'll have to go and have conversations with, the exec, and they've got 1,000 priorities on. Unless you're speaking their language and saying how this is a business priority, it will not get put on that list. So we just have to be real. There's no shoulds with likes. Yes, we know the importance, but we have to speak that language. And as well, being leaders, practitioners, future of work, whatever else you are, it takes treating this like discipline, and why that might be boring to start to do that work, so we don't get to the holistic well-being stuff that we really enjoy. This will make a bigger impact and give you the scope and modus operandi to change the shit that ain't working, and together then we can get people on board and move them forwards. But it takes a shift in approach, and again, as I say, I'm seeing some people step into it bravely, but not easy to do.
Yeah, and you're right. It's about translating, right, and saying, okay, well, what's the business impact here, and this is why it's important, and ultimately, it's about productivity, right? That's what it's going to drive, and the candor, right? Like,
Exactly. Productivity is really difficult, Erin. Like, the upside is almost one of those, like, which way the wind going to blow. I could be like, oh, you could use the research. We're going to see a 7,000% increase in productivity. No, you're not. Like, but what is easy to quantify, and if you don't have the figures, you can get industry averages and find out your average salary and work it for yourself. Absenteeism, use the Deloitte multiplier for presenteeism, and then attrition as well. So if you do that work, you can calculate the downside. That's real. Then you can start to imagine the upside. But start on the down, the actual cost, and that, trust me, that will light a fire of interest with the exec and get you the opportunity then to get more data to do a realistic assessment of where you are. But until that happens, it will continue to be something, yeah, we've got that covered, tip.
yes, absolutely. And yeah, there's like, we could keep going. I feel like we need to have another conversation, Ryan. We've covered so many great topics here. Just curious if there's any final words of wisdom you have for our listeners today.
As I said earlier, right at the beginning, I get lost in this. I talk about numbers and engaging that many people, and you forget the individual sometimes. It's important to bring it back. So, like, helping one person might not change the world, but it might change the world for that one person. If you can just pay it forward a little bit today, trust me, someone else will do the same. There's a term I wrote about in my book, actually. Yeah, available in all good bookstores. You know what I mean? Don't forget this. The chapter called Iskida Ekmek, and it's a Turkish term. Essentially means bread on the hook. And you go into the bakers in Turkey, and I don't know if you'd say it or pay for it. I don't know how it works. I don't speak Turkish, but you'd say a skida ekmek, and you purchase a second loaf, and you put it on the hook outside for someone in need. And essentially, that's what we can do in the workplace with something you're doing. Don't send the calendar invite for 30 minutes or an hour. Auto schedule yours to finish early. Don't send the calendar invite without the description or the agenda or the objectives, or run over not respecting someone else's time because someone will do it to you. Don't send an email to someone who's on leave because it will come back to you. Like, try and think how you would want the space to be and pay that forwards. And if a few people start considering that, would make huge difference as well. And then you can start to educate other team members. I decline meetings now if they come in at 30 minutes or an hour. I said, nope, I do 20 minutes or 50. Can we change, please? Decline invites if my objective or my participation in the meeting isn't clear. While it might feel like I'm being a bit rude and confrontational, I'm not. I'm doing it to save you time so you can finish your work and step away and spend time with your family in the evening. And when we hold each other to account, we're a bit more eskida ekmek, chucking a piece of bread on the hook. Trust me, we'll all be better off for it. So if you can consider something, try and take that into tomorrow, and it will help you. Trust me, because it will come back round, and it will help the people you're working with as well.
Awesome, Ryan. Thank you. And that's from your book, 52 Weeks of Wellbeing. Excellent. Yeah. And so thank you so much for all of this. If our listeners want to reach out to you, how can they connect with you in 20 minutes or 50 minutes?
That's it, exactly. Yeah, don't go putting stuff in my calendar. So my website is theryanhopkins.com. It was the only one that was available. I wouldn't call myself otherwise it sounds rather grandiose and gross, so you have to excuse me for that. Ryan Hopkins on LinkedIn, and Ryan Hopkins UK on Instagram and TikTok. And if you found this interesting or myself semi-relatable, if you completely disagree and think I'm an ignoramus, I welcome your feedback and I'm open to it. I just want to say thank you, Erin, for having me as well. I apologize for this being so long, but it's been a wonderful conversation.
Oh, it's been great, Ryan. I'm so grateful for all your contributions and insights and information. It's fantastic. And for this podcast, we would also love to hear from you, our listeners. You can contact myself, Erin O'Byrne, via LinkedIn or my website, workwellnesscoach.com, or to our ongoing host, Kim McDonald, on LinkedIn or at her website, 13factors.ca. We're always looking for topics and guest ideas, so please reach out. You can check out our other episodes if you like what you've heard. Spread the word on social media. And we spend so much time at work. Let's make it a great place to be. Thanks so much, Ryan, and thank you to Flourish DX, our podcast sponsor, for making this podcast possible. Until next time, thanks.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.